What if I told you there are places on this planet where stepping inside means you may never come out alive? Places where the air is thick with despair, where the walls whisper the screams of the forgotten, and where survival isn't just difficult, it's nearly impossible. These aren't just prisons. They are human graveyards where the living are trapped in a slow, merciless death. Would you survive a day inside? For most, it's a place of punishment, a facility designed to strip away freedom. But in some corners of the world, prisons aren't just about confinement. They are war zones, death traps, human dumping grounds where the law ceases to exist and survival is nothing short of a miracle. These prisons don't just house criminals, they break them. Behind these walls, the weak are prey, the strong barely hang on, and the unlucky, they disappear into the shadows, never to be heard from again. From the frozen cells of Russia's Black Dolphin prison to the lawless chaos of Venezuela's La Sabaneta, each of these facilities has a reputation soaked in blood and fear. Brutality is routine, escape is a fantasy, and justice, a long-forgotten word. These are the 7 deadliest prisons on Earth. Welcome to Black Dolphin Prison, Russia's most feared fortress of punishment. Sitting near the Kazakhstan border, Black Dolphin is a maximum security nightmare, designed to house the worst of the worst: serial killers, terrorists, cannibals. The prison itself resembles an unmarked military base, wrapped in layers of steel fences and guard towers. There are no windows, no fresh air, no chance of escape. Inside, inmates exist in a state of absolute control. From the moment they arrive, prisoners are stripped of their last shred of humanity. Shackled, blindfolded, and frog-marched through the halls by armed guards, they are never allowed to see the full layout of the prison, so they can never even dream of escaping. Once inside, they are crammed into tiny bare cells, each no larger than 50 square feet. There is no privacy, no furniture, just a steel bunk welded to the wall and a metal sink bolted into the corner. The lights never go out. Day and night blur into one. The rules? Inmates must remain standing from sunrise to sunset. No sitting, no resting. Meals are served through a tiny slot in the door, watery soup and stale bread, just enough to keep them alive. Every 15 minutes, guards check in to ensure no one has attempted the unthinkable: suicide. Some inmates have called it a living tomb. Former prisoners who were released after wrongful convictions describe the experience as pure psychological warfare. One survivor stated, "You are nothing but a body here, a shadow. You forget your name. You forget your past. You forget that freedom ever existed." But Black Dolphin is just the beginning. If you think standing for 16 hours a day is torture, wait until you step inside a prison where you don't even exist in the eyes of the law. If Black Dolphin is a prison that crushes the body, then ADX Florence is one that destroys the mind. Hidden deep in the remote deserts of Colorado, this prison is designed for one purpose only: total isolation. And once you're inside, you are forgotten by the world. Nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies, ADX Florence is the most secure prison in the United States, home to terrorists, cartel leaders, and the most dangerous criminals in history. The prison stretches across 37 acres of barren land, surrounded by towering fences, razor wire, and armed guards who have one job: make sure no one ever leaves. Inside the prison is a maze of concrete, reinforced steel, and electronic surveillance. Every hallway, every cell, every inch of this place is designed to keep inmates completely cut off from human contact. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Their cells are small, windowless, and soundproof, designed so they never even hear another human voice. The beds? A concrete slab. The toilet? A metal fixture bolted to the wall. There are no phone calls, no visits, no chance of physical interaction. Meals are slid through a narrow slot. Showers? Limited to 3 times a week, always under heavy surveillance. The 1 hour of recreation they're allowed each day, spent alone in a concrete cage staring up at the sky through a tiny grated opening. There is no air, no light, no color, just the walls and your own thoughts. Many who enter ADX Florence never leave, not because they die, but because their minds unravel. Some prisoners reportedly talk to themselves for hours, scream into the walls, or even gouge out their own eyes just to feel something. Among the infamous names locked away here, El Chapo, the ruthless drug lord who once tunneled out of a maximum security prison in Mexico, but now has nowhere to run. The Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, whose life's work of terror ended in a cold, silent cell. Ramzi Youssef, the man behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, who once said, "I don't need human interaction." But after years in ADX Florence, he takes every opportunity to beg for a transfer. But even here, there are rules. Even here, there is order. But what if there were a place where rules don't exist? Where guards hold no power and only the most savage survive? Welcome to Venezuela's La Sabaneta prison, a living hell where the only law is chaos. In ADX Florence, inmates are buried alive in silence. But in La Sabaneta, silence does not exist. Here the screams never stop. The gunfire echoes through the halls, and the only rule is survival of the fittest. Welcome to the most violent prison in Venezuela, a place where even the guards fear to step inside. Located in the sweltering heat of Maracaibo, La Sabaneta is a crumbling fortress of chaos. Originally built to hold 700 prisoners, it became a human warehouse with over 3,700 inmates, crammed together in filthy, roach-infested cells. There is no running water, no proper sewage system, just the stench of death lingering in the air. Unlike most prisons, where guards maintain control, here they barely enter past the gates. The real power belongs to the inmates, ruled by violent gang lords known as prans. With smuggled weapons, drugs, and even grenades at their disposal, these men turn the prison into a battleground. In La Sabaneta, there are no set mealtimes, no structured routines. If you want food, you fight for it. If you want protection, you join a gang. And if you cross the wrong person, you die, sometimes in the most horrific ways imaginable. Beheadings, hangings, and public executions are common. Prisoners are armed, AK-47s, pistols, even homemade explosives. The infirmary is non-existent. If you get sick or injured, you are left to rot. The weak don't last here, one former inmate recalled. If you have no money, no weapons, and no connections, you won't make it a week. The most infamous event in La Sabaneta's history took place in 1994, when a war between rival factions erupted inside the prison walls. With no guards to intervene, prisoners butchered each other for hours. Over 100 men were killed, many burned alive in their cells. One survivor of the massacre later described the horror. "I saw men crawling, skin melting off their bones. I heard screams that didn't sound human. It wasn't a prison. It was a slaughterhouse." Even the government eventually admitted they had completely lost control of La Sabaneta. In 2013, authorities finally shut it down. But for thousands who once lived there, the nightmares never faded. But if you think the horror ends here, you're wrong. Because while La Sabaneta was lawless, there's a place even more terrifying. A prison where the walls don't just hold criminals, they trap their spirits. Welcome to Kwang, Thailand's notorious Bangkok Hilton. In La Sabaneta, brutality ruled. But in Kwang, prisoners don't just fear the beatings or the torture, they fear the silence. The kind of silence that follows a death sentence. Because here, the execution chamber is never empty for long. Nestled along the Chao Phraya River in Bangkok, Thailand, Kwang Central Prison, nicknamed the Bangkok Hilton, is anything but luxurious. It was built in the 1930s to house 800 inmates, but now holds over 6,000, packed into cells designed for half that number. The walls are thick. The air is heavy with sweat and decay. The cells? Barely 4 feet wide, where 5 or more men are crammed together, forced to sleep in shifts because there's simply no room. For the first 3 months, every new inmate, regardless of their crime, is shackled with heavy iron chains bolted to their ankles. Some prisoners wear them for years, their legs slowly deforming under the weight. Food is scarce. A bowl of rice with rotten fish or soup filled with insects is all they get. And if they want more, they have to pay. Except money means nothing when the guards are more corrupt than the criminals inside. The prison is infested with rats, cockroaches, and disease, but medical care is almost non-existent. Sick inmates often lie in the same cells as the healthy, waiting for death because there's no treatment, only suffering. Bang Kwang houses Thailand's death row inmates, and executions are carried out with terrifying efficiency. Inmates are told only hours before they die. They wake up, expecting another day in hell, only to be led down a long, dark hallway where they face their fate. Before 2003, executions were performed by firing squad, a machine gun aimed at the back of the condemned's head. Today, Thailand has adopted lethal injection, but the fear remains the same. One man was my cellmate for 3 years, a former prisoner recalled. One morning, they took him away. By lunchtime, he was gone. By evening, his bed was already filled with someone else. But if you think Bang Kwang is the worst prison in Asia, you haven't heard of the place where prisoners are turned into experiments, where the walls are lined with horror. Welcome to North Korea's infamous Camp 22. In Bang Kwang, prisoners fear execution, but in Camp 22, death would be a mercy, because here, the walls don't just trap criminals, they hold entire families. And once you enter, you are never leaving, not alive. Deep in the mountains of Huryeong, North Korea, lies Camp 22, one of the most secretive and horrifying prison camps in the world. It isn't just a prison, it's a living nightmare, a total control zone where inmates are considered political enemies of the state. The camp stretches across 87 square miles, larger than some cities, and is surrounded by electrified fences, armed watchtowers, and minefields. Inside, there are no trials, no sentences, no possibility of release. Once you are sent to Camp 22, you are erased. Unlike most prisons, Camp 22 doesn't just punish individuals. Entire families, parents, children, even grandparents, are imprisoned for crimes as simple as speaking against the government or having a relative who defected. Inmates are forced to work 16-hour days in freezing temperatures, mining coal with their bare hands. Food is so scarce that prisoners resort to eating rats, insects, and even grass just to survive. Beatings, torture, and public executions are routine, sometimes for the smallest infractions. A former guard who defected once revealed, "People there don't cry when someone dies, because death means they no longer have to suffer." But the most horrifying secret of Camp 22? The human experiments. Former prisoners and defectors have reported chilling accounts of biological and chemical weapons testing performed on living people. Entire families locked in glass chambers, exposed to poisonous gases as scientists watch them slowly suffocate. Prisoners injected with deadly diseases like anthrax and plague to observe how their bodies react. Starvation experiments where victims are deliberately deprived of food to test the limits of human survival. One survivor who managed to escape recalled seeing a mother and her young child placed in a sealed room. They released a gas inside. The mother desperately tried to breathe through the small cracks, shielding her child. But after a few minutes, they both collapsed. Scientists just watched and took notes. But as horrifying as Camp 22 is, there is one place even darker. A place where the inmates aren't just prisoners, they are prey. A prison so violent that its nickname is the Gates of Hell. Welcome to Carandiru. In North Korea's Camp 22, prisoners die in silence, their suffering hidden from the world. But in Carandiru, death is loud. It comes in screams and gunfire, in rivers of blood that stain the concrete floors. Because here, survival isn't just a struggle, it's a war. Once located in the heart of São Paulo, Brazil, Carandiru prison was a city of suffering. Built in 1920, it was designed to hold 4,000 inmates. But at its peak, over 10,000 men were crammed into its overcrowded, decaying cells. The walls were covered in graffiti and blood, the air thick with the stench of sweat, rot, and despair. There were no real guards inside the cell blocks. Gangs ruled Carandiru, and their law was simple: kill or be killed. Life inside Carandiru was a brutal game of dominance. Inmates were packed 20 to a cell, with no beds, no toilets, just a hole in the ground. Food was scarce, water was filthier than sewage, and disease spread like wildfire. The weak were hunted by the strong. If you didn't belong to a gang, you were a target. If you had no money, you had no protection. If you crossed the wrong person, you didn't live to see another day. Stabbings happened daily. Guards rarely entered the cell blocks, afraid for their own lives. Medical care, almost non-existent. If you got sick, you died. If you got stabbed, you bled out. A former inmate once said, Carandiru wasn't a prison, it was a slaughterhouse. Every day someone disappeared, and their body parts would be found in the sewage system. Carandiru wasn't just a prison, it was a powder keg. And in 1992, it exploded. On October 2nd, a fight broke out between rival gangs inside Pavilion 9. As tensions rose, the guards lost control. But instead of negotiating, the military police stormed the prison with machine guns and attack dogs. 111 inmates were killed in what became known as the Carandiru massacre. Many were executed in cold blood, shot at point-blank range while unarmed. Survivors described how guards forced them to kneel before shooting them in the head. The aftermath: the prison floors were soaked in blood, bodies piled on top of each other, their faces frozen in terror. One officer later admitted, "We weren't arresting them, we were exterminating them." Carandiru was so violent, so infamous, that the government eventually shut it down in 2002. Across the world, these prisons are more than just cages for criminals. They are graveyards for the living, places where every breath carries the weight of fear, violence, and despair, where men lose their names, their identities, and eventually their minds. Some of these prisons crush you slowly, stripping away your sanity, your dignity, your will to live. Others take a more brutal approach, a quick death at the hands of another prisoner or the very guards meant to control them. But here's the most terrifying question of all. Are these places of justice, or have they become something far darker, places where the punishment is worse than the crime? And now imagine this. If you had to step inside one of these prisons, knowing there was no way out, which one would you choose? You know that the world's deadliest prisons are more than just concrete and steel. They are nightmares made real. But now I want to hear from you. Which prison shocked you the most? Do you think these places serve justice, or are they simply inhumane? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive chilling, eye-opening, or downright terrifying, don't forget to like this video to support more content like this. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Share this with your friends because some horrors are meant to be known. Until next time, stay safe and remember, some prisons don't just trap the guilty, but the unlucky too.